Alright guys, so I wasn't able to upload over the last couple of days because, as you can probably see from the change of scenery behind me, I was in the process of moving apartments, but I am back now and we got a lot to catch up on. So I want to go ahead and start off with the man himself, JD Vance, who already, in just a couple short weeks, since Trump decided he was going to be his vice presidential nominee for the 2024 election, has become possibly one of, if not the single, worst VP picks in modern American history. So we got a lot to get into here. I want to go ahead and start off with Benny Boy himself, Ben Shapiro, who is basically admitting that conservatives are kind of regretting the JD pick. So let's go ahead and watch a little bit of this here.
Speaking of errors that Republicans are going to have to avoid. So JD Vance is the vice presidential nominee for President Trump. Now, if you had a time machine, if you go back 2 weeks, would he have picked JD Vance again? I doubt it. I think he probably would have picked somebody like Glenn Youngkin from Virginia in an attempt to broaden out his base. Instead, he went with JD Vance, feeling, because he was right, that at the time he had a very solid advantage in the race against Joe Biden. Well, again, JD is super smart. He also has a long history of public commentary. So back in 2021, this is the sort of hot controversy of the day from the Democrats. Back in 2021, JD Vance was appearing on Tucker Carlson's show back when Tucker's show was on Fox. And he ripped into what he called the childless cat lady culture of the Democrats, including Kamala Harris.
What I was basically saying is that we're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we've turned our country over to people who don't really have a direct stake in it?
Now, I agree that our country has moved away from caring about the future because too few Americans care about having children. I totally agree with that. However, this description that JD Vance is using, is that politically smart or is it politically damaging? Now, again, he doesn't have a time machine. He can't go back and undo something he said.
Okay, so yeah, that's kind of politically damaging, right? Not to mention the fact that Kamala Harris, I believe, does have stepchildren. So I guess if you don't consider stepchildren to be somebody's children, then that could be a take. I think it's a take that would probably enrage many step-parents across the country. So not exactly the smartest move from JD there. I'm pretty sure Pete Buttigieg also has a kid now as well with his husband. So on top of that, on top of it just being, as Ben was pointing out there, politically stupid to make that kind of a commentary point, it's also just bizarre the way that it was being framed. Because in that conversation that JD was having with Tucker, he was setting it up as we are controlled by some sort of a corporate oligarchy, and that corporate oligarchy is represented by childless cat ladies. Guys, the corporate oligarchy is a result of capitalism. Right? It is a result of the increasing consolidation of power into the hands of a tiny, handful of elites in this country. It's the result of capitalism. It's the result of corruption that we have allowed to run rampant in our political system. And by the way, a vast majority of the billionaire class, the multimillionaire class, is like straight white men. So to portray the corporate oligarchy as a bunch of childless cat ladies is, again, number one, politically stupid, and number two, just like factually inaccurate. And it tells you that JD Vance, although he wants to portray himself as some sort of like a populist, anti-establishment type figure, he's not actually serious about challenging the oligarchy or challenging the corporate elite. He's just, trying to engage in challenging the, woke liberal elite class, which is how he perceives the oligarchy to be. So there you have it. You got Ben Shapiro basically saying that, if you could go back a little bit in time, Donald Trump probably wouldn't have chosen JD Vance to be his VP. And by the way, apparently Trump, from reports behind the scene, apparently he was actually considering guys like Glenn Youngkin and Doug Burgum as his favorites, and then his own kids, Don Jr. and Eric, as well as reportedly people like Tucker Carlson and people like Elon Musk, were pressuring him to choose JD Vance. So Trump probably at this point hates his own children even more so than he did before, which I didn't think was really possible. But now we move on to this because JD actually responded to this backlash from that clip that's been circulating from a couple of years ago, and he basically doubled down. We're not going to listen to this whole clip here, but as pointed out by the Kamala HQ account, he responded to his childless cat ladies backlash comment by apologizing to cats and then doubling down on attacking women, saying, "I'm sorry, it's true." So that's the kind of political instinct that JD Vance has. Now we get to this, because there were a couple of different segments here that I wanted to play for you guys from CNN in terms of how historically unpopular JD Vance is as a VP pick. This shit is completely unprecedented over the last 40 years of American politics. So let's go ahead and watch this first CNN clip here.
It's the negative net territory. Look at that, negative 6 points. I will tell you, Aaron, I have gone all the way back since 1980. He is the first guy after immediately following a convention, a VP pick, who actually had a net negative favorable rating. That is underwater. The average since 2000 is plus 19 points. JD Vance making history in the completely wrong way.
I mean, it's amazing. Plus 19. And I know people talk VPs don't usually matter, but they're usually
they're pretty popular.
Usually
they're popular. In this case, he's dragging Trump down.
All right. And then there's also Ohio, which I, have been around long enough to have been there on an election night. And the reason I was there, because the person who wins Ohio wins the White House.
Right.
Ohio's a red state now.
Yeah.
So what does the JD Vance pick do for Trump? Obviously, he is senator from Ohio.
There's this whole idea, JD Vance is, going to help out in Ohio, perhaps help out in those Rust Belt, those Great Lake battleground states. But if you look at Ohio, JD Vance won in 2022, but he only won by 6 points. That's worse than Donald Trump did in 2020. It's far worse than Mike DeWine did in 2022. He was the worst performing Republican candidate in 2022 up and down the ballot in the state of Ohio. He has nothing there.
All right, so Trump does very well with white working class voters. That's one of his superpowers. So what does Vance add?
Yeah, what does Vance add? Look, he won white working class voters. He won white voters without a college degree in the state of Ohio. But pretty much every Republican wins white working class voters. And if you look here, again, the margin that Vance put up was the weakest performance of any major Republican. It's worse than Trump did in Ohio. It's worse than Mike DeWine did in Ohio. The JD Vance pick makes no...
Okay, so in other words, why the hell did Donald Trump pick JD Vance to be his VP? Well, it looks like what happened, which is kind of alluding to what Ben Shapiro was saying in the first pick, the first clip, is that Donald Trump picked JD Vance because Donald Trump wanted a pure loyalist behind him, okay? He didn't do this as a strategic pick. He basically just wanted somebody who he thought would be a dutiful lapdog for him. And that was JD Vance. Now keep in mind, JD Vance is also the same guy who previously, years ago, I believe before he was a Senate candidate in Ohio, called Donald Trump America's Hitler. Okay, he was a never Trumper kind of guy. And as soon as he needed to win that Ohio Senate election, then he comes on his hands and knees groveling for Donald Trump to save him, and he did. Now, he ended up squeaking by, and he won in the Republican primary, and then he won in the general election to achieve that Senate seat just a couple of years ago. So he ended up pulling it through, but as you can see from the margins in that clip, it was actually significantly an underperformance, even relative to Trump, even relative to Mark DeWine, right? So he's not even that strong of a candidate in Ohio, which is his own home state. And I believe in the second clip we're going to watch here, his favorability numbers across the country, but also in Ohio specifically, are horrendous, awful. The people who know JD Vance the best, the people who live in Ohio, hate him somehow more than everybody else does, which is saying a lot. Now, again, average since 2000, okay, for vice presidential nominee net favorability rating, the average is plus 19, and JD Vance is minus 6, which is the lowest ever. Guys, we're talking about lower than Sarah Palin. We're talking about you would have to go back to, I don't know, the 1950s or before that to get a less popular VP pick. Now we get to the second one. Now, I'm not actually going to play through this entire thing, but I just wanted to show you some of the numbers, again, as that comparison point. So in his home region, right, views of JD Vance in Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, and Wisconsin. So a lot of those Rust Belt states, Midwestern states, 28% favorable and 44% unfavorable. Guys, 28% favorable is horrible. It's horrible. It's worse than where Joe Biden was at. It's worse than where Trump is at. It's worse than where Kamala Harris is at. This is awful, unprecedentedly awful in terms of a VP nominee. Now, again, you do the comparisons to Dan Quayle from the 1988 election, Sarah Palin from the 2008 election. When they were announced as the VP candidates, Sarah Palin was plus 26 on favorability, Dan Quayle plus 15. These two people right here are widely known in modern American history to be the worst presidential VP picks in modern history, okay? Sarah Palin, some people make the argument that she was single-handedly responsible, or at least largely responsible, for tanking John McCain's presidential campaign. That's how bad she was. And even Sarah Palin, when she was announced as the VP, was plus 26 in favorability. Vance, negative 5. He is an awful VP pick. And again, he was picked because Republicans were confident. Why were they confident? Because they thought Joe Biden was going to stay in the race, right? I think reasonably so. Joe Biden was repeatedly saying he's going to stay in the race, but now Republicans are completely shaken up and they're panicking and they're trying to figure out a way, number one, how to deal with the fact that they just picked JD Vance as their VP, and number two, trying to figure out ways to attack Kamala Harris. And it seems like all they can come up with at this point is just like, she has a weird laugh and oh, she's like a radical lefty Marxist. It's like all of the attacks that I've seen, at least so far, from Republicans against Kamala Harris are either completely made up, right, based on things that she doesn't actually support or she's folded on, right? Some of them have been attacking her for previously supporting Medicare for All, which again is something she ended up backing off of. They just cannot figure out a way to attack Kamala Harris in a real substantive way, which is ironic because as a leftist, I could figure out a dozen different ways to attack Kamala Harris, right? In terms of her coziness to some, corporate figures and corporate, massive corporations, her history as a prosecutor and an AG and a district attorney. Like, we could go through her entire record and figure out ways to attack her in substantive ways, but they just can't figure that out yet, right? And so they're panicking. And so now we get to this in terms of the why JD Vance is extremely weird, right? Which is going to tie into some of the later clips that I have to finish off this video with Tim Walz, the governor from Minnesota, who is being heavily considered to be Kamala Harris's vice presidential pick. And he basically led the charge in just framing Republicans like JD Vance and like Donald Trump as just old weird guys, right? Which is kind of, I think, going to be more appealing to normie voters than like this, sort of more like highfalutin talks and idealistic talks about protecting democracy and whatever the case may be. Just calling them weird little freaks, right? Weird guys, because they kind of are to a large extent. And so here's pointed out by the Kamala HQ. Weird that JD Vance just deleted this from his website. End abortion. So JD Vance's abortion position is probably going to be huge. This is something that Kamala Harris is going to lean heavily on. The overturning of Roe v. Wade, the fact that Donald Trump appointed the Supreme Court justices that did that. This is going to be a big factor in this election. It also helps the fact that Kamala Harris is a woman, right? And so she has a little bit more of a leg to stand on to talk about this issue. And especially when you contrast it with Joe Biden, who has never really been extremely strong on abortion. He's always kind of been meek about it and shy about it and has never led the charge on it. So I think that's going to be a big advantage for Kamala Harris, especially when you look at, campaign websites like this that used to, at least before he deleted it, say, I am 100% pro-life and believe that abortion has turned our society into a place where we see children as an inconvenience to be thrown away rather than a blessing to be nurtured. Eliminating abortion is first and foremost about protecting the unborn, but it's also about making society more pro-child and more pro-family. So in his own words, JD Vance is 100% pro-life. Right? This is the kind of guy who could get behind a national abortion ban. That is going to be massively, massively unpopular for this election cycle, where abortion could be a top 3 issue for voters, right? Now, we also had JD Vance in a leaked call and leaked audio who was calling openly for a federal response to block women in red states from traveling to another state to get an abortion. So not only does he want a total, pro-life platform, total abortion ban, he doesn't just want that in conservative states like Ohio, which has produced incredibly draconian and brutal results since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, but he also wants a federal response to prevent women from even leaving conservative states to go and get abortion in blue states that allow for abortion. I mean, this shit is going to absolutely play a major role, right, in what voters think about this guy going into the election. Now, we also have this. Now, this clip is amazing. So, Dave Portnoy, right, who I think obviously is more so on the, conservative side of the equation, he says, this is fucking idiotic. You want me to pay more taxes to take care of other people's kids? We sure this dude is a Republican. Sounds like a moron. If you can't afford a big family, don't have tons of kids. So, what he's referring to is that in this clip, it seems like JD Vance is kind of sort of alluding to like a fucked up version of the child tax credit, but he pitches it in somehow the worst imaginable way that you could possibly imagine. So let's go ahead and listen to this short little clip here back from a couple of years ago when JD was on the Charlie Kirk show.
I'll go back to something I said earlier about we need to reward the things that we think are good and punish the things that we think are bad. So you talk about tax policy. Let's tax the things that are bad and not tax the things that are good. If you're making $100,000, $400,000 a year, and you've got 3 kids, you should pay a different, lower tax rate than if you're making the same amount of money and you don't have any kids. It's that simple.
I totally agree.
We'll go back.
Okay, So, again, this is very similar to the child tax credit that was passed and then it was allowed to expire for a number of different reasons. Republicans, some corporate Democrats, stepped in to prevent it from being re-upped, right? We all know the backstory on that. It seems like that's kind of what he's alluding to, but he's pitching it in a reverse way. Instead of just making this a simple policy and saying, I think that families, right, who have to deal with the exorbitant costs of childcare and groceries and everything like that, I think that they deserve a tax break, a tax credit, if you will. Instead of doing it like that, he's saying, like, basically, I think we should punish people who don't have kids, and they should have to pay a higher tax rate than people who do have kids. I believe there was also audio, if I'm not mistaken, of JD Vance a while ago, basically floating the idea that people with families should get an extra vote for every one of the kids that they have. So in other words, you're basically almost completely disenfranchising single people or people who just don't happen to have kids or people who can't have kids. You're disenfranchising them by giving additional votes to people who have multiple, children in their families. I mean, this is absolutely insane. Like, this guy is a weird little freak, right? He can't even pitch wildly popular policies. Like, the child tax credit is extremely popular on a bipartisan fashion, and he can't even get that right somehow. Now we move on to some of the more interesting stuff here, guys. Some of the more interesting stuff, because over the last couple of days, people have been memeing JD Vance into oblivion. This is just one example. JD Vance ridiculed for accidentally revealing explicit dolphin-based search history. So, that's quite a headline, right? What are they talking about here? Here's the tweet. He says, maybe the internet was a mistake. But then when he's posting here from the Crazy Clips account, you can see that woman and dolphin are highlighted in black, or they're bolded. Now, the way that that happens on Twitter is if you specifically search for those terms, then those specific words will be in bold. So it looks like, according to this, that JD was, for some reason, searching on Twitter the words woman and dolphin. Why was JD doing that? I don't know. You guys tell me. This is just one of the things that has been floating around over the last couple of days. One of the many controversies. But it doesn't patch up to this. It doesn't come close to this one. From the Rolling Stone. So, what's with this rumor that JD Vance had sex with a couch? Had sex with a couch. So, this one is amazing, right? The origins of this are that JD Vance wrote a book called Hillbilly Elegy, right? This was his big claim to fame, and it sort of helped him rise up in the political sphere. He wrote this book. Somebody randomly, after he was chosen as Trump's VP, on Twitter, posted, this isn't actually true, but this is what they posted. They said, on page 179, JD Vance in Hillbilly Elegy talks about how he had sex with a couch, right? Then it just absolutely takes off from there. Everybody starts talking about it. Everybody starts posting memes of JD Vance with a couch. He can't resist it. He's got, sexual fantasies about couches and ottomans and everything in between, right? So this takes off. It becomes a massive thing. Now JD Vance can't even be seen on a couch without people thinking about him potentially wanting to fuck it, okay? So that's the origins of this. It was all based on nothing. It was all based on just one random Twitter post. But now it's become this massive thing to the point where you have mainstream media outlets that are having to come out and try to fact check it, right? We had an Associated Press article that was coming out fact check, no, JD Vance did not fuck a couch, okay? So this is how it's been going, right? This is less substantive than the other things that we're talking about with abortion access and the fact that this guy's backed by venture capitalists, right? All of that. It's less substantive, but it's also, let's keep this in mind, right? Possible couch fucker. We don't know. We know that it was sort of based on a made-up allegation on Twitter, and that's where this story sort of emerged and came out from the beginning. But can we confirm that JD Vance has not had sexual intercourse with a couch? No, we cannot. We cannot confirm that he has not had sex with a couch. Now, we also have this. JD Vance has a burnt monkey testicle problem. Guys, these are the headlines that are coming out about JD Vance. You go to the Google Trends where you can look up how much people are searching for any given thing. JD Vance dolphin, JD Vance monkey testicle, JD Vance couch sex. These are things that are exploding online right now. I legitimately don't think there has ever been this bad of a VP launch. I mean, the GOP Ohio Senate nominee's investment in a biotech firm that does testing on live animals is raising questions about his true values. Now, JD is already making a big mistake here, guys, because he's posting, because he's seeing all of this floating around online, and because he's sort of like a younger guy, he's way too online for his own good. And so I think this is pissing him off about all of the couch fucking memes, the dolphin memes, etc. This is pissing him off. So he feels the need to respond to it. But JD, this is a mistake. You can't respond to it. The second that you are having to defend yourself along the lines of JD Vance is weird, you've already lost the battle. You've already lost the battle, okay? But here he goes. He posts this clip, and this clip is basically just Kamala Harris from a 2020 town hall event with Chris Cuomo on CNN, where she just gives an introduction and says what her pronouns are. Like, that's literally this entire clip. I don't even think it's worth playing it. She just says, I'm Kamala Harris, my pronouns are she, her, right? I don't care if you think that's cringe. I don't care if you think that's unnecessary. It's not a big deal either way, right? This is like a tiny, minuscule thing that we're talking about here. She said her pronouns, right? And so the fact that he feels the need to respond to this in the first place, again, says that you're way too online, but also the fact that you quote this by saying, JD Vance is weird. And the implication is that, well, I'm not weird. Kamala Harris is way weirder because she said her pronouns? Like, this is the comeback that we're dealing with here? I don't know, guys. It doesn't seem like he's ready to handle this. It really does not seem like it. There was another clip that I didn't pull up for this video, which I probably should have, which was basically JD Vance at one of his first major speaking events after being picked as the VP. And he got up there, and it was the most awkward thing I have ever seen in my life, where this man was constantly, it was like the Jeb Bush, please clap kind of situation. He made a joke where he was saying, you know, liberals say that everything is racist. I just drank a Mountain Dew the other day, a Diet Mountain Dew, and they're probably going to say that's racist. Pfft, what? And like, that was the joke. And not even people in the conservative audience were laughing. And then he has to laugh himself. He goes, ha ha ha, I love you guys. Oh my God, dude. Super uncomfortable. One of the most uncomfortable things I've ever watched in my life. The guy is a charisma void, okay? He's now being accused of having sex with couches. Apparently he has an explicit search history track record when it comes to women and dolphins. Apparently he's got a monkey testicle problem as well on his hands. And also, by the way, he's a demon on policy. He's not even good on policy, right? This man is not a populist. Let's just keep that in mind. This guy's not in favor of the PRO Act. This guy's not in favor of Medicare for all or raising the minimum wage or anything else like that. This guy is a venture capitalist back lapdog. That's what he is. So let's not pretend as if this guy is some outsider populist candidate or something like that. He's just a weird, way too online, reactionary freak. That's who JD Vance is. And I think that a lot of conservatives, again, are starting to recognize that and are regretting the pick there. So now we're going to finish off with this, with what I think actually looks like a good VP pick. Now, this is Tim Walz, the governor from Minnesota. And the reason I like this guy is, as outlined here by Secular Talk, Kyle Kalinske, friend of the show. I like this guy because he had a very close state legislature in Minnesota. I think they only had control with one seat as a majority. And this is what he was able to get passed. Universal free school meals, legal weed, carbon-free electricity by 2040, tax rebates for the working class up to $1,300, 12 weeks paid family leave, 12 weeks paid sick leave, banned conversion therapy, red flag laws for guns, universal background checks for guns, automatic voter registration, free public college for people making under $80,000, a ban on the forever chemicals PFAS, $2.2 billion increase in K-12 school funding, and sectoral bargaining for nursing home workers. That's what he did with a one-seat majority. That's insane. That is insane. Now, is he perfect? No, of course not. But is he probably the single best VP selection candidate that Kamala Harris could make? I think so. I think either him or maybe strategically like an Andy Bashir would be somewhat decent. There's a handful of other guys that I would think wouldn't be big mistakes. I think Josh Shapiro would be a big mistake. I think that Mark Kelly would be a big mistake for labor reasons, for Israel reasons. But this guy seems to be pretty decent, right? So let's go ahead and listen to a couple of different clips from our boy Tim Walz.
Why is it so hard to understand? When somebody else gets them right, it's not like a damn pie. Oh, somebody got a bigger piece of pie. I don't get it. Rights aren't that way. There's enough for everybody. There's enough for everybody to be included. Same thing with jobs. Same thing with housing. Same thing with healthcare. So, you saw it. We are not going to allow them to make the case. Yes, they're a threat, but we're not going to stay in their frame. We're not going to stay where they're at. We're not going to play their game. We called them out for the weird nonsense that they believe, and we presented a different argument to the American public. One where everybody matters, one where we can achieve, one where we solve problems. And what's so great about this is, we know here in Minnesota, that message works. We are the majority. That's why they shrink the vote. That's why they make it harder to vote. That's why they try and bring fear. And that's why they try and get you to the point where you're pessimistic. And what difference does it make? But guess what? I got a 23-year-old. TikTok cares again. People care again. We've got folks out there doing the work just like you. So here's the deal. Think about this. And for the young folks that are in here, this is a transformational moment. This is an opportunity to go and then put those policies into place. And, okay, I realize this is a bit petty, but I'm thinking about this. Imagine Donald Trump waking up after Kamala Harris beats him in this election.
I mean, not bad. Not bad. It only gets better from there, though. Here's another short clip from MSNBC where, again, he was pushing this idea that, these conservatives are just a little bit weird, right? Let's listen to this real quick.
We do not like what has happened where we can't even go to Thanksgiving dinner with our uncle because you end up in some weird fight that is unnecessary. and I think bringing back people together, well, it's true. These guys are just weird. And it's, they're running for He-Man Women Haters Club or something. That's what they go at. That's not what people are interested in.
I mean, he's right. He's right. Again, it is fucking weird. Like, can we just center ourselves a little bit? Like, yes, there is a serious authoritarian threat that I think needs to be taken into consideration when it comes to Republicans. There are other things that we need to talk about. But also, they're just fucking weird. Like, they are. Like, half of what they talk about now is trans people and, like, children being generally mutilated and shit like that. It's like, these people are just fucking weird. Like, this is bizarre behavior that has taken over the Republican Party at this point. Now, one last clip here, and then we'll finish off the video. This is him on CNN pushing back on the idea that all of those accomplishments that I was just showing you guys here are going to somehow be a liability. This is a ridiculous question here from Jake Tapper, but let's go ahead and listen to it.
But you've legalized recreational marijuana, you passed universal background checks on guns, you expanded LGBTQ protections, you implemented tuition-free college for low-income Minnesotans. There's free breakfast and lunch for school kids. Do you think your record is an asset to the ticket, or would it risk fueling Trump's attacks as you being a big government liberal?
What a monster. Kids are eating and having full bellies so they can go learn, and women are making their own health care decisions. And we're a top 5 business state, and we also rank in the top 3 of happiness. Look, they're going to label whatever they're going to label. He's going to roll it out, mispronounce names, to try and make the case. The fact of the matter is, where you see the policies that Vice President Harris was a part of making, Democratic governors across the country executed those policies, and quality of life is higher, the economies are better, all of those things. Educational attainment is better. So, yeah, my kids are going to eat here, and you're going to have a chance to go to college, and you're going to have an opportunity to live where we're working on reducing carbon emissions. Oh, and by the way, you're going to have personal incomes that are higher, and you're going to have health insurance. So if that's where they want to label me, I'm more than happy to take the label.
So there you go. Tim Waltz, not bad. If I was going to advise Kamala Harris, I would definitely say go with this guy. He's got a nice grandpa vibe going on there, even though I'm pretty sure he's the same age as Kamala Harris, and he clearly knows how to push back on the right-wing talking points, right? I mean, that question there from Jake Tapper was a little bit ridiculous. He lists out all of the policies that Tim Waltz has managed to pass with a 1-seat majority in Minnesota, and he's like, is that going to feed into right-wing attacks? And it's like, okay, Republicans want to attack us on the fact that you're feeding school children, and you're increasing paid sick leave, and allowing nurses to engage in sectoral bargaining. Like, are these really going to be valid attacks? Is this going to resonate with the American people? These are such radical ideas that people will think that he's like an uncontrollable Stalinist or a communist or something like that. It's like, no, like, these are very popular across the board policies, and again, I think he's good. So you guys tell me. I mean, I think, again, that Josh Shapiro would be a massive mistake. I think that Mark Kelly would be a massive mistake. I think Andy Beshear and Tim Waltz would probably be my top 2. I don't think I would necessarily mind having a big boy like JB Pritzker in the mix there, but Kamala's got a lot of decent options on the table for who she could select as her VP, and Republicans are already regretting the JD Vance VP pick, which is kind of hilarious to see. So I'll keep you guys updated. We'll see how this all plays out.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me. Everyone is saying